The last demo was more about physical objects or real life objects, but we know that object-oriented programming is not just about that. You can also have programmatic objects like filters, array, so on and so forth, and that's what this demo is about. If we were to build a contract for any class that would act as a filter, really all what we need to do is to have one method that will take the object and will return a Boolean value that will indicate whether that object was accepted to this filter criteria or not. So I'm gonna go ahead here, I'm gonna create a new interface and I will call it filter. This filter will only have one method. It's gonna be public that will return a Boolean value. I'll call this method accept and it will take object as a parameter. I'll just call it X for now. Now that we have the contract for filters, I'm gonna go ahead and create a more specific type of a filter. So here I'm gonna create short words filter. All right, and this filter will implements filter. We get the error. Yes, we want to implement the methods. Hit OK, and here's that. So the filter contract that we signed here kind of forces us to take object type as a parameter, not strings. And although this is a short words filter and we're expecting to use that on strings, we can't really modify the signature of this method. So what we're gonna have to do here is to cast that object into the type that we're interested in. And in that case, it is string. I will call this value. And to cast it, I'm just gonna type in the new type between parentheses, so string X. So that will cast the X or the object into a string type. So our method here is to return a true or false based on specific criteria. So I'm gonna remove this return false and I'm gonna say return whether or not value dot length is more than 5, or actually less than 5. So if it's less than 5, then it will return true. If it's more than that, it will return false. I'm also going to go ahead and create a helper class that will have some utility functions that or methods that we can use. They're not really around any specific object, so it's not really fitting to put it in anywhere else. So I'll go ahead and create a Java class. I will call it helpers. Hit OK. Yes. In my class here, I'm going to have one method called collect filter that will take an array list or a collection of objects and a filter, and based on that filter it will return a new array that passes that filter. So here I'm gonna create public. This again will return an array list of objects. I will call this collect filtered, and like we mentioned, it will take an array list of object as a parameter, and it will also take a filter as a parameter, and I'll just call it filter here. All right, let's create an empty array list of the filter data, the ones that we're going to return to the user. So this type object, I'll call this filtered collection, and it's a new array list like that. Okay, so now we're gonna have to loop over this original array or original collection, and we're gonna check it against the filter. So here we'll do a for each. Let me clean this a little bit, and I'm gonna loop over object of or from the collection. For each of those, I'm gonna have to check if my filter dot accept this object. If it's true, then we're gonna add it to our array list. So our filtered collection dot add will take this new object. And finally, we're gonna have to return this filtered collection. All right, let's review this again. Here I have one method called collect filter that will take a collection of objects and a specific type of a filter. It will loop over this collection, and for each of them, it's gonna test it against the filter that we're gonna pass to this helper function. If it passes it, it will add it to the filters collection, and finally it will return it back to the user. All right, so let's test this. I'll go back to my program here. Let's just comment all of that out. And I'm gonna create an array list of strings here. Here we go. Now I'm gonna need to pass this original collection into my helpers class method, the collect filtered. So we know that this method will return back a array list of objects. So I'm gonna create an array list of objects. I will call this filtered collection, and this will equal helpers dot. I don't see my method, and that's probably because I forgot to make it in static method. So public static. Here we go. Save it. Go back to my program. Now helpers dot collect filter, that will take an original collection and it will take a filter. We didn't create the filter yet, so let's go ahead and do that. My filter, which I'll call F for now, or let's just call it filter, will be a new short words filter. Let's pass that into our function. Save this. And now we have a filtered collection. Let's actually test that. So for each item or for each object in this array, I'm gonna print it out to the console. So map it or cast it to a string because this is an object. Go. Let's save and run our application. And here we go. We only get back the array or the filtered collection that passed our condition, which was less than 5 characters.